You know what's crazy, Rich?
Your shirt?
My shirt?
Yeah.
God. All right. There it is. Thanks again for joining us on this episode.
Yeah.
Damn. Getting dunked on. I like this shirt. I'm sorry it's not black. I just can't do the solid color anymore. I had to bring some color.
Yeah, color. That's exactly how I describe it.
Welcome to the show, where air takes the flow. Lee and Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by the only CEO with a mindset that I care about, Rich Swire. How are you doing today, bud?
Doing great.
Talking about love and happy relationships in the pre-show.
Yeah.
You know, as we're warming up here, and
just another day of baking in the sun of a glorious afternoon in Florida. And
emphasis on baking. Extremely hot out.
Dream.
Summer is here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know how to transition to. It's getting hot in the C-suite when we're talking about AI. God, that was terrible. But either way, when we're talking about this topic today, this is a article and kind of a study that came out a couple weeks ago that you shared with our team over here at Rhea, and I thought it would be a good episode to do on the podcast, primarily because we work with a variety of different businesses, and even when we're working with large companies and talking to their C-suite team and trying to help them understand how to navigate the AI space, I feel like we're running into a lot of the same questions or concerns that our SMB division is going through. So this entire survey was built around like this shift in CEO mindset when it came to AI. And I figured we could pull a couple topics out of there, talk about some stats, and hopefully bring everyone that listens to this kind of into the pool to understand how they can be using this for really the next 2 years. I think that mindset that I'm seeing from this survey is really applicable for the next 24 months. Not something you're doing tomorrow, but something you should be taking a step forward on that path.
Yeah, it's always nice to see research being done. And in this case, I think it was a couple thousand different CEOs were surveyed. So anybody who's out there, trying to figure out where they are in the race, or in the process of deploying AI, they can kind of get a nice little understanding for their cohort where they are, right? Because a lot of people might feel like they're behind. A lot of people might feel like they're ahead. So, it's a nice way to kind of consolidate it. And there's some good statistics out of this that allow people to really understand maybe what they also might expect moving forward too.
No, absolutely. So let's kind of start off with one of the topics I pulled out of here. So this productivity to performance shift with agentic AI, again, for those that have been listening to our podcast for a while, we've been beating this drum since day one. But the fact that CEOs are starting to look at AI as not just simple automation, but something that drives like specific outcomes in their business is something that we've harped on for a really long time. So this implementation into agentic AI isn't just about like, I would like to automate X. It takes it a lot further into what the readiness of that process actually looks like. So just from a high level, Rich, just so we don't have to get too caught in the weeds here, I mean, what are some things that you feel a business of any scale should just look at from day one about how they ready their business for AI over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think one of the things this survey kind of highlights, and maybe it intended to, or maybe it just got to there by happenstance of its survey. But, I think people are probably underestimating the cultural shift of going from, basically your 100% of your resource is human-based and moving toward a smaller percentage of that being human-based, not necessarily because you're letting people go or reducing your staff, but more importantly, you're adding AI agents as additional workforce, right? So when you go from most of the jobs that you have and define within your organization, as you go out and hire people, are typically task-based or role-based, right? Like everybody has their job. And then so the starting point for most people who are evaluating the fact that at some point they are going to bring AI agents into their business is to identify what roles and what tasks are the low-hanging fruit, or the ones that you want to first look at agentifying, and then working with the people that currently do that task on building the training and understanding what is actually happening.
Being the masters of that craft.
Yeah. And I think the the bottom line, and I think this is why it's going to take a lot longer for AI to be adopted in most industries than people believe, is that it's not a technical problem that we're facing, in the sense that deploying AI and spinning up an AI agent and having it work and having it function in a very generic and generalized manner, although it does take some technical expertise, it's not a massive feat. Everybody can experience this through ChatGPT. You can build some pretty fantastic things with AI in a very short period of time. But when you start to implement this in a very specific use case, like a business, where that business has a certain way of doing things, each person that works in that business has a certain knowledge base, and they have either habits they've created or processes that are standard to their business operations. So, you could take any business, like one restaurant to another restaurant, and sure, there's similarities, but there's probably a lot of differences, maybe more so than you would think. And so deploying an agent in one business doesn't necessarily mean you can just pull it out and deploy in the same way in another business. All that kind of qualitative and quantitative data is going to be much different, right? Their systems are different. Their databases are different. Their training is different. The way that their business runs is different.
And the expectation, I think, is huge.
So the inertia that we're entering into is more about the legacy of what is currently in place, versus the idea that this technology is not yet ready for prime time. I think it's more about, okay, how do I convert what I have into this new form and function? Mm-hmm. And it's not software in the traditional sense, where you're just implementing a new software stack, or you've signed up for a new, call it CRM system or whatever, and you're making one big data transfer, right? You take whatever this database is and you kind of transfer it over to this database, and maybe there's some training. Everybody has to learn the new interface, but for the most part, that's a relatively predictable, deterministic evolution. And we've all been through it through different businesses. We wake up one day and everybody says, okay, you got to get off Gmail and move to Outlook. It's not that jarring because the applications are very similar.
Right.
So with AI, it's completely different in the sense that you're really kind of digging beyond that application layer into the human layer. Mm-hmm. And so now when you talk about transforming humans, that's just a whole nother ball of wax, because, every single human within your organization has a tremendous amount of value and talent that's not necessarily in a database in some sort of schema. It's stuff that's kind of qualitative, that you have to really, unless you sit down with that person for weeks at a time and learn what they're doing, do you really understand the tribal knowledge that they have? So it's preparing for that is like number one, for sure. Well, the culture and preparing your workforce for what's coming. And in some cases, what we've heard from our clients and other sources, and I think the survey also reaffirms this, is that it might take a CEO or an executive team forcing the issue, right? Basically pushing it down people's throats for their own benefit, because I do think that a lot of people are apprehensive of what, and concerned, and maybe they hear things that are not necessarily true, or maybe they are true, but only they're taken out of context. But it might take some bravery on an executive side to say, listen, guys, no matter what, this is coming. We have to embrace it. The first one to the finish line in this first phase of adopting AI is going to have a greater advantage than we could ever hope for in this business. We need to embrace it. We need to retrain everybody on this. And so I think it's more about getting people's mindset into this AI first mentality. Mm-hmm. And otherwise you're not going to be able to do anything. Yeah. If nobody uses it, right? Like, nobody wants to do it.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter how you implement it. It's not going to be used.
Well, I think that's because there's probably two different conversations being had internally inside of that business, right? One of them is the ROI expectation that whoever the decision makers are trying to get as the outcome there. And then you have the adoption conversation, which is, I'm not saying people are necessarily ruining the experience because they're like, I don't want this to take my job, but they're fearful of it, so they're not going to necessarily adopt it right away. One of the interesting stats in this was that only 25% of AI initiatives, according to these CEOs that were surveyed, met an ROI expectation. So no matter how much investment actually took place there, 25% of those initiatives felt like they delivered on a return from that investment, which I think really speaks to a lot of clients that we've talked to, that kind of, I think, come to us with a slight uncertainty about what they want to do next, because they're like, oh, I've already tried doing this, or I've experienced this and I didn't really see success with it. And that gets back to one of our core beliefs, which is either you went way too wide on whatever the use case or expectation was, and you didn't drill down on something that you could execute very well. So the other piece of this was that only 16% of those successful, initiatives that took place actually scaled through the enterprise-wide audience. So to me, that's something that either you went in with, you're trying to boil the ocean and you just didn't do it, so now everyone's pushing the brakes because they're afraid of investing more money, or something did work really well and it was hyper-focused, but everyone outside of that initial use case is like, I'm not really sold on this. And unless everyone can kind of come together and have a clear understanding of what you're trying to accomplish and there's buy-in from the teams, I think you're going to see a lot of these stats not necessarily move up as quickly as maybe they were hoping for adoption.
Yeah, I have, surveys are always informative when it's clear to everybody what they're actually measuring, right? If they're, and sometimes surveys, you see it all the time where they'll say 75% of people are confident. Well, what does that mean, right? And I kind of look at this 25% one with a little bit of hesitation, because I even if somebody asked me today, and we live in this space and we understand it very intimately, if you took 10 use cases of where you were to apply AI, maybe a couple have quantitative ROI measurements, right?
Sure.
You could actually go okay,
we drove
this actually
more sales,
delivered.
check mark.
Yeah, right. We implemented this AI to qualified leads and we went from 15% to 18%, and that's generated this. So there are some, but there's a lot of AI projects out there that honestly is very tough to understand what the ROI is. What's the ROI on ChatGPT if you gave it to an employee? Well, you could argue that, there's no ROI because I'm not really seeing any financial benefit from it. But the reality is that
I'm getting
person
performance benefit
is getting a dramatic performance. Nobody can argue that, right?
Sure.
Especially if you give ChatGPT to a coder, he's 10xing his output. Now, is there an ROI on that? And how do you measure it? Not sure. Maybe if that person's smart, he's probably not telling anybody he's using ChatGPT, because he's turned his 40-hour work week into a 10-hour work week. The last thing he wants to tell his boss is that I'm using ChatGPT to do my work, because then that means he'll get more work. He's just figured out how to
game the system a little bit.
Yeah, game the system. So I think there's a lot of that happening where there's not a real clear measurement of what that means.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I think the biggest challenge with AI is that a lot of these projects, especially CEOs of these companies that are surveyed, a lot of these quote unquote AI projects probably started 2-3 years ago.
Right.
So this is pre-GPT.
They all wanted to still build their own internal stuff, and now that they felt that
they probably started
coming,
on old school technology, old school framework. They probably over-engineered. The bottom line is, if you started building AI prior to mid last year, you could just throw it away. Honestly, and they probably already are. They're probably like, this was a complete waste of time. Maybe
that's the ROI expectations they're talking about. That 25%.
They started before the race really got started with the technology. The foundational models were not there. Even the infrastructure that those foundational models haven't really been cemented. Even Google and Apple are still considered today not necessarily ready for prime time. And those are the guys who are building the foundation, right?
Yeah.
And so really, when you're talking about OpenAI, it only really got sophisticated and got to the point where I would consider it, because we built a lot of our stuff on their framework, ready for prime time about a year ago, right? So I'm guessing that most of these projects didn't start less than a year ago, because if you're talking to CEOs and they're aware of it, it's probably been 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And they probably were a lot of false starts. There's probably a lot of startups that have died because they've just been out-engineered by some native stuff that's now available for free from OpenAI or Google or whoever, right? So
do you feel like though that's part of the problem here is it's not just legacy software or systems that are in place. It's this legacy way of thinking where it's no, I have to do all of this stuff internally because that's going to be our proprietary push and all of this. And it's so much of it has become commoditized so quickly that I think a lot of CEOs and anyone in a decision-making role have to kind of rethink what they're doing and breaking their just their process that they've done. Not necessarily blowing up your business, but like you can't approach AI in the same way that you did when you said, I need to buy a new ERP system, or I need to go and get this piece of accounting software because we need it now. Like it's just so much different than that.
I guess I would be, if you want to take the extreme position,
I'll always take the extreme position. Let's go.
I'll try to steel man argument this, and I'm overstating this to some degree, but it's probably very true. Is if I was a CEO of a company, and I was considering looking at AI, and maybe I have a tech team, right? Yeah. I have a CIO, CTO, or I have some developers. The first thing that I would be saying to myself, again, if it was me, would be, do not trust what they tell you. And what they want to work on, because what's going to ultimately happen, and they're not bad people for doing this, it's just natural of any sort of creator and developer. They're going to want to they want to work on the cool new stuff that's coming out, and they're not going to necessarily be working on your business problem, right? The thing that's going to drive outcome. They're going to want to tinker, and we are in this tinkering phase of AI. I mean, every day something comes out that's shiny and new and really cool.
And it's like, how can I use that in some way?
And if I'm a developer, I'm going to try to figure out a way to kind of spend my time playing with that. The last thing I want to do is figure out how to automate your purchase order or run queries against this legacy database using
re-understand
LLMs.
A Jira, Confluence,
it's like not fun for me right now.
Yeah.
Although that's where you're going to get the most ROI and bang for your buck. They're going to be over here tinkering with all the new toys.
Yeah, fair.
So you almost have to come in from a perspective of like, all right, guys, we have to really look at outcome driven development plans, and I need to pull you away from all the shiny toy stuff, and we need to figure out a way to be more efficient and to see what is out there in the world of AI that we can leverage and build on top of. And that's obviously what we discovered two years ago when we started building our framework and our platform. Is what we realized very quickly is that if we don't have a framework and a platform to allow our team to build on and then our customers to build on, they're going to end up having to start from zero and build all this technology to get to the point where you can actually start building stuff unique for your business, right?
To get to the starting line, this is all the stuff you're going to have to do.
Because to say I'm going to build an AI agent assumes that you have this platform and framework that has all the components, all the things teed up and ready to go so that you can actually customize what you want to build for your business. So, which is why we always tell people you have to start with some sort of framework or platform, because if you're going to be building these things from scratch, you're going to end up being burned and spending way more energy and time and money, which could be another driving force of this low ROI. Is that ROI is not just about did it work. ROI is that did we spend $1 million to save $100,000? And so like they could have overspent development time, development resources on a relatively small and simple problem that could have been easily solved if you started from the 99-yard line instead of the end zone, right? And running the ball back, right? So if you only had 1 yard to go and had to tweak it and customize it, you could have gotten to an ROI pretty easily. In fact, the extreme statement here from an ROI perspective is there shouldn't be a use case. I have not run across a use case yet, I'll put it that way, where I don't look at it, building an AI agent or an agentic workforce to solve that problem doesn't have a very clear ROI calculation.
Yeah. If it's not ROI positive just from a smell test, then you're probably wasting time on it.
Yeah, but I haven't found one that doesn't have it. That's my point. Like I can't even imagine something that doesn't have an ROI if you do it correctly, right? If you follow this kind of recipe for success that we've discovered, which is, start with a solid framework and focus on what's unique to your business. The customization of that AI agent is where you should focus your energy, not building the core system or the core skills and the things that require this agent to actually live, right? Start from a place where you can actually implement.
Doing something that drives value.
Like basically, like if I were to use an analogy is like, if I want to build a custom application for my computer, I don't start building Windows, right? Or I don't start coding. I don't start building like assembly code for the chip, right? I mean, there's a reason why these layers exist, and there's companies that provide these layers that get you. I could start by building on top of something that already exists. I always wonder why people want to rebuild. Every time I hear somebody go, I think we're going to build our own model, I'm like, well, I don't understand why you would build a model that these guys are investing billions of dollars. And the same goes with our framework. Why would you build a framework if there's one that's out there that's relatively easy to implement?
Well, we've heard a lot less of that, I think, in the last 6 months than we did before, right? So one of the last topics we'll kind of touch on here, I do think this pilot paralysis is something that we've touched on a little bit today already, but because you start hearing statistics as a CEO or someone who runs a business that, hey, all this money's been invested and only, 1 out of 4 companies feel like they've seen value out of it. I do think that kind of gets people to, like you said, the 1 yard line, and they just go, I don't know, let's just call it a game. Like, let's not even worry about scoring. Like, we had a good time trying it, but let's focus on this one thing and then get back to doing what we normally do. So do you feel like that need to break out of the pilot mode comes from just, again, having a clear KPI and having just the plan of, once we do this, what are we doing next, and creating more of a step-by-step? Or is it as simple as you come to the table and you've got 3 or 4 people that say, I want to build AI to do this for me, and then everyone just kind of points to it and says, nope, we're going to do that to start? Like, do you feel like there is still this idea or concept of planning actually is going to allow the production to take place? Or is it really they have to have a pain point that is so sorely sticking out that it's like, yes, AI can address this. Now let's just focus on that and don't care about the other, like you said, shiny objects that are coming in, taking our time?
My guess is that most of these pilots that are either in, just stuck in this circular kind of not ready to be launched.
Yeah, or even failure to launch. They got there and they just
failure launch. I'm guessing it's probably 80% of the reason is because the teams that are putting these things together, trying to deploy them, are learning on the job. Like, this is brand new technology.
It's a good way to look at it.
We learn on the job, and we spend 100% of our time doing this, right?
Sure.
And it's because it changes. It changes and evolves, and it's exciting to be in the roller coaster ride, but it also
it's exhausting too.
You can't discount the fact that you have to be in learning mode, and when you're in learning mode, you're not necessarily ready to pull the trigger on going live with something any short period of time, because you have fears, uncertainty, doubts of what you're building, because this is new technology.
You definitely have a lower capability of saying, like, all right, I feel comfortable if this is ready to go, especially if you're just learning it, like you said, on the fly.
Yeah. Knowing that's kind of where we are, I think everybody is, in that no matter where you are in the evolution of AI, I guarantee you that you don't have that many people who really, really understand how it works and how to build scalable enterprise applications, because it's you can only get that through time, and there just hasn't been enough time, right? And now, but there's probably people who've read up that are students, they love it like us, and they're certainly building some really cool stuff, but you still have to factor in time. The second thing I would say that's probably slowing people down is the fact that they are going after, they don't know and understand how it works, and they don't know what I think a lot of people look at AI as the answer, but they don't know what the question to ask. So almost everybody says, can AI do that? Can AI help me with this? Can AI help? It's like, there's no shortage of that. Right.
Right.
They think of things and they go, I bet you AI could help. They just think AI could solve everything.
Yeah. Or when we deploy one solution and then from there, they just, like, it's a huge unlock. But now they're taking their eyes off the prize and they're throwing it everywhere. And it's like, no, reel it back in.
Yeah. And they don't know, they don't really understand how complicated, like, they don't understand the difference between something like, they think everything is the same amount of work, right? Like, it'd be like saying, I want to go on a hike. Well, if I just said that, everybody kind of reverts to the mean of what a hike is in their mind, but a hike could be Mount Everest, or it could be like a
we
flat
parked on
road.
the side of the road, we walked down to a waterfall.
I'm gonna hike on a flat land in Florida. Completely different, but that's kind of, we're in that consolidated thinking of, like, okay, everything in AI feels easy, so it's going to be easy, and that's just not the case, right? So a lot of times people just pick the wrong project, right? I mean, I guess if you took 4 use cases, the odds of one being really easy to implement, low risk, and high adoption is probably about the right stat, which aligns with the 25% ROI, right? There's probably a lot of failure to launch because of that. And the third thing would be, we kind of mentioned this at the start of the episode, and I do think people are probably underestimating it, is it's kind of a lose-lose in the sense of your employees and your culture when it comes to AI right now, because either you have an employee who absolutely loves AI and is absolutely like 100% all in with ChatGPT or some equivalent tool,
Yeah.
but they're not telling anybody. There's no,
Yeah.
because they don't want to, they
The
don't want to
gatekeeping
tell,
everything.
they don't want to say like, oh, I'm doing my job using the AI, because it has, maybe there's like this weird thing in the mind that they think that they're cheating or something, right? Instead of, or maybe they're just afraid that that if the boss finds out, that they're not going to have so much free time on their hands, right? It's like, it's almost like the new version of quiet quitting in a weird way, right?
Yeah.
You're doing your job better.
Everything's getting done, but you have your door closed, and it's like, man, Lee's in his room for 8 hours. It's pretty great, but it's because
right. But you're probably your smartest, best prompt engineers, aka ChatGPT users, are unknown to the CEO.
Sure.
Because they're not coming out and saying it, right? And then, or the lose-lose situation is the other side, that you have this cohort of people that are just like absolutely against it, and for whatever reason are just like, they won't even use ChatGPT because they feel like, maybe it's because they, I don't know, who knows what the reason is, but so it's almost like you're kind of screwed one way or the other, no matter how you look at it. And so what you're left with is your tech people who really can't lie, because they're like, yeah, they have to know about AI, because they're the first people you ask if you're the CEO, like, hey,
Jim,
what's our plan for AI? I got to tell my board of directors. And he's like, oh, okay. And he goes and looks up AI and starts learning it.
Yeah, which we get a lot of that traffic too. You know what I mean? We get a lot of people coming in for that.
I think we're just in this natural state of, okay, everybody's trying to figure it out. Everybody's kind of maybe a little bit too bravado on what they think they know. But we all know that once AI is put into the real world, it absolutely is not as easy as people think. And so that's probably where their apprehension comes from as well. There's a lot of maybe people who are launching AI too prematurely, not built well. A lot of people who are building AI that probably shouldn't be building AI. There's all that stuff. It's like everything else. But I do agree with you. The next 2 years, this will be leveled out, and there will be a hyper sophistication of what I would call AI engineers, which aren't necessarily developers. They're the mix between people who understand how to prompt and how to talk to AI, but also by that time also build applications and build real systems. Yeah. And that is we're at the beginning of that phase. So I'm guessing that the real ROI is going to kick in for most companies that aren't as sophisticated, later next year, when they actually figure out like, oh, okay, I get it. AI is different. We can't think of it this way. We can't think of it that way. We have to think of it in this new way. And we have to measure value in a completely different manner, because the output of the company and the acceleration of the company and the compression of time on how long it takes you to go from A to B is going to be the big measurement of ROI for AI. I don't think companies are even thinking about measuring it that way, because we haven't had something so transformative come into the picture.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? Like, we're building applications in our world in days, which usually used to take months.
Right.
Is there some ROI calculation for that? Not really.
Yeah.
Maybe the
hours of dev and then times.
Yeah, but nobody's monitoring that.
Exactly.
Right? So
because they're always ongoing, but.
Or it's even some of our basic stuff, like where we're doing thousands and thousands of outreach calls and messages out to prospects for our customers. They were not doing that before. That was not something that was part of their business. They couldn't do that before. They didn't have a call center. So how do you measure ROI on that? Because ultimately all those leads go right back into your sales team. And so really it's kind of this indirect ROI. So basically they're going, okay, we're getting a lot more leads because AI is nurturing and bringing more leads to my sales people, and my sales going up 20% this month. But are they correlating that back to the AI, or, is that in place? Because again, these things didn't exist. So there's probably not a measurement in play. So again, it could be, it's a lot of things that have to be built into this that I think we'll have to cement over the next 18 to 24 months. But I'm curious to see, how things, obviously unlock, and how fast everybody starts moving once people get to be confident and start using this in the broad daylight, right? I think that it's almost like we all have to come out of the closet to some degree
Okay.
with AI.
Interesting way to wrap, but sure.
Yeah, and it's just, some of us came out of the closet real early, like me, and then hey, it's going to take. Some people don't want to tell their parents, but
I don't know.
Some point,
I don't want you to know what I've been doing with AI.
At some point, we're going to have a parade, and I'm excited for that day to come, because when that does come, I think we're all going to be like, the world is going to forever change, and there's just never going to be. We'll be wondering why it took us so long.
No, for sure, man. And it, some of the takeaways that we're talking about here, and what I've seen from clients that we worked with, if you've got the courage, the creativity, and the commitment to trying to do something with AI, and you just really hone it in, like you're saying, like you'll see the benefit over either a short period of time because you've solved a very small but very descriptive problem, or you now see that the door is open and look at everything that AI could possibly start doing, and then your team gets involved and the buy-in happens. So yeah, the next 18 to 24 months are going to be way more exciting than the last 18 to 24 months, even though AI came on the scene and disrupted a ton. I'm so excited to see where things go from here.
Yeah,
awesome.
Definitely.
Well, hey, everyone, thanks again for coming out of the closet with us and joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, check out our Substack for more content, which will be linked to this episode to continue this discussion. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Welcome to the show, where air takes the flow.